Jacksonville. The child was born but couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. The poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. With Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
The week that was on the 27th of October 2018, our last program of October. We're here in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth and beaming from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. We have the Ouija board model in the corner there. You'll be hearing more about the Ouija board model as we start to run down these results from various congressional districts, senatorial campaigns, and House campaigns in the various states. We'll be looking at the Cook Report tonight and where they have moved some races over, and we'll be making commentary, and that'll be the Ouija board commentary. So on we go. We'll start in Los Angeles with sports and the L.A. Dodgers. Now, the L.A. Dodgers in the 18th inning, and some of my notes I made here. This was the longest World Series in the history of the World Series, over 7 hours and 5 minutes. They threw 507 pitches. That was just through the 16th. So there were a lot of pitching going on there. And this is a fatal stroke. And we'll see if the so-called blue wave, the Democrats, can do what the L.A. Dodgers did. They were at, as they say, the door of defeat. And now they live for another day. They will play tomorrow in Los Angeles. Let's go to this little brief broadcast here.
Muncy flies one in the air to left center. Back at the wall, and it's gone! It's over! Muncy, a walk-off home run to win Game 3 in the 18th. Night. The most unlikely story of the Major League Baseball season, Max Muncy. Let go by the A's a couple of seasons ago. Went to work with his dad to reconfigure his swing. Had a good year in the minor leagues last year with the Dodgers, but they didn't think enough of the season to activate him for the postseason, so he watched with everybody else.
Mr. Yesiel Pre was the person that put the liquid on Mr. Muncy.
Game 3 of...
And let me pause that as we move back to our presentation here. We'll start off our presentation. We'll have Uncle Carl Rove here, of course, and we'll look at what is going on in Brazil, a good place to start. More violent attacks in Brazil, and of course, we can equate this with the recent attacks out of the state of Florida, a pipe bombs being sent to people, including the former President Barack Obama, Bill and Hillary Clinton at their address. George Soros, the Twitter King, Booker got one. Of course, our own Maxine Waters of Los Angeles received it. The list was long and got to be longer, but because of fingerprints and other things, this character there was a classic character. He had a van with all kinds of Trump stickers on him, etc. Now he's in jail. So this does mimic the campaign in Brazil. That is Bolsonaro is the right-wing candidate there in Brazil, a business type, and his supporters in recent weeks have threatened to harm the Supreme Court justice, have physically attacked journalists and opposition voters. They have the balance has been attributed to the backers of Bolsonaro, and also, and this is from Reuters. Mr. Haddad, he's the candidate of the Workers' Party to a lesser extent. This is back to the old DJ Trump maximum of, well, both sides did it, and not true in Brazil. There the climate is very, very tense. This right-wing candidate is flirting with fascism, period. And the Reuters points out that some opponents of DJ Trump here in the U.S. got pipe bombs in the mail. But the situation in Brazil is far more precarious, and let's say because it is already suffers from extreme violence there. There were 64,000 murders were registered last year, but less than 10% of the homicide cases result in charges, according to the data from the government of Brazil. Bolsonaro, who maintains a double-digit lead, I haven't looked at some polling lately here, and he was suffered a stabbing during a campaign rally last month. He's still recovering, but the episode only reinforced his aggressive rhetoric, and this is the same thing you hear combating verbal attacks on political opponents. You've seen that replayed here in the U.S. The PT crew, you'll have the civil and military police with legal support to bring down, of the law down on your back, he said in a video broadcast to supporters at a demonstration on Sunday. These delinquent Reds, he called them, will be banned from our homeland. So the rhetoric is already there. In fact, at some of the rallies, his supporters have on Trump paraphernalia, if you can believe that one. Bolsonaro, because of his rhetoric supporting violence and the aggressive manner, he has campaigned, has opened up Pandora's box on political violence in an already extremely violent country. That is from Raphael Appendi. He's a safety expert at the Getúlio Veiga Foundation in the University of São Paulo. If people thought Brazil had extremely high levels of street violence in normal times, imagine what's going to happen over this type of president here. An investigative journalist, we'll get to that group, Elbado, I'm butchering that, said since January, 24 journalists who covered the campaign had been physically attacked. Another 82 targeted in online hate campaigns. Same thing going on here. By comparison, 40 U.S.-based journalists covering all topics were physically attacked during the period, according to the U.S. Press Freedom Ticker database ran by 24 press freedom groups. Bolsonaro's supporters were blamed for most of the attacks in Brazil. So this is a situation in Brazil. He's 63 years old, former army captain, a supporter of the Brazilian junta that was in 1964 to 1985, and cites one of the political period's most notorious torturers, Colonel Carlos Hiroshimaana, as a personal hero. As president, he said he would encourage the police to kill suspected criminals with abundance. He wants to loosen gun control so civilians can defend themselves, and at times he suggests violence can solve the political problems in Brazil. Vassalaros has won over tens of millions of Brazilian voters with his inflammatory anti-establishment stance. That is how these so-called populists run their campaigns. But once they win an election, they are not anti-establishment, as seen here in the U.S. with DJ Trump. He then gets the support of the quote-unquote business community. And some others that will vote for Vassalaros because he can make Brazil safe, which is a basic lie. On to Mexico here. They've offered temporary identification papers and jobs to immigrants. Those are the asylum seekers on the march towards the U.S. border. DJ Trump said he'll send the Marines or whatever he'll send. Or he will just close the borders down. The so-called caravan, the Mexican president, who fortunately Enrique Peña Nieto will said that the migrants wishing to obtain temporary identification documents, jobs, or education for their children can do so by registering for asylum now this is in southern Mexico. The plan is only for those who comply with medical law, as Peña Nieto said in a pre-recorded address broadcast on a Friday afternoon. Estrada Unto Casa. Make yourself at home. Immigrants, that's in Chiapas. And Azteca. Those are some states that are way away from the border. Chiapas, and you remember the rebellion in Chiapas. Oops, we'll get back. He's on the border of Guatemala and has enabled Trump to campaign hard on illegal immigrants. And this would be a fix, prior to the election here, if they in fact do this, have said of those immigrants who do not qualify for refugee status are liable to be deported. The Mexican government has said that more than just 1,700 people in the country have registered for asylum, while others have returned home. The estimated size of the group obviously varies. A lot of propaganda here. Mr. Rivera, the Honduras ambassador to Mexico, told Mexican radio on Friday that the caravan could reach Mexico City by next Friday. He put the official head count at 3,500. Not very many people in actuality. Tens of thousands of Central Americans set off for the U.S. every year, looking to escape violence and poverty. Honduras, Guatemala, and Salvadorans make up the bulk of these people, but there are other people also that come in on this status. A little bit about Freedom Ticker here, and I'll append this on some of the outlets. Journalists arrested, that is this year in 2018. 7 journalists attacked, 40 of those. Journalists killed, 5 journalists subpoenaed, 18. This is in the United States, so you can see the problem. Let's go to Uncle Carl Rove here. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal on the 26th of October. America's midterm referendum. I am on the ticket because this is a referendum about me. That's from DJ Trump said on the 2nd of October in Mississippi. He is correct. Every midterm election to some extent is about the Oval Office, some far less than others. Rare exception, FDR, 1934. Bill Clinton, 1998. And G.W. Bush in 2000. The party in power loses ground in midterms, both in Congress and down ballot. Voters always seek to provide a check on the incumbent party. Poised to deliberate promises are both. GOP received good news this week as a new Gallup poll, and Gallup does this once every week. His approval rating, this is DJ Trump, said 44. That is up 6 points from last month. I'd have to look at that one. his near all-time Gallup high of 45 after the June summit. That was with Chairman Un in Democratic Republic of Korea, a record high that survey for his time in office. Trump's cumulative third quarter rating was 41.2, about where Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton were in their first term. Yet voters hammered both presidents in the midterm that followed. Republicans lost 26 seats, as in 1982. And the Democrats shared 54 and their majority in 1994. That was when Bill Clinton was in office, and Newt Gingrich and his contract on America. Still, Trump is likely to preside over a rare midterm gain in the Senate. This is the most favorable Senate map for the party in the White House since senators were first popularly elected. That was in 1914. 26 Senate-held seats are on the ballot, compared with 9 Republican seats. These are Democrat seats. 10 of the Democrat seats are in states that Trump carried in 2016. Most key Senate races are being fought where Trump's ratings are higher than the national average. Still, the White House must be shrewd if Republicans expand their Senate edge and keep the House majority, at least at a minimum. Recent private polls in states with major Senate races found that 38% of the voters approve of DJ Trump and his policies, while 43% disapprove. But there's a third group, 16% dislike Trump personally, but favor his policies to win in a mini contest. Republican candidates not only whole of the crowd that likes everything about the president, but also corral most the half of the and that's usually a usual strategy. Happy voters who are pleased with Trump's results, but not with him. Well, in American politics, you always separate the president or the president's policy administration, such as happened with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton had prosperity while he was there. And the recent third quarter results of 3.5 down from the 4.3 or whatever it was in Q2. But that is to be expected. But again, this one of the things to note, this is a preliminary estimate of Q3. The midterm elections aren't only about Trump. If Democrats lose ground in the Senate, the blame goes to Schumer and Dianne Feinstein as the minority leader. Schumer failed to create an effective, loyal opposition as ranking Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, and Dianne Feinstein all but single-handedly stroked a surge of conservative interest in the election, though it was already on the way by uttering and mishandling Kavanaugh's confirmation. The mishandling of Kavanaugh's confirmation can be attributed to old man Grassley and all the secrecy. If you recall, the so-called FBI investigation was held in secret. That document has never been released to the public, and they only interviewed a minority of people involved in the controversy around Dr. Ford. The Democrats need to win 23 seats to capture the House, and even if they end up with a narrow majority, it also reflects poorly on Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, incidentally, has addressed herself. She's in her late 70s, and she doesn't plan to be the leader for time immemorial. So that problem will solve itself there. Let's go now to, where are we going? Charlie Cook. And this is Jennifer Duffy. Senate 11 days out. Jersey moves to a toss-up. That's the problems there of Menendez in New Jersey. Now, highly handicapped, this is from our crystal ball model, is in trouble in North Dakota, heading for defeat. They call it here. Democrats now need a gain of 3 seats to win the majority. One would be to hold the 5 Democratic seats in toss-up, pick up 3 or 4 Republican-held seats in a toss-up. That's just not a realistic scenario. Well, we'll point out here in a second. On the other side of the equation, for the first time in months, it's possible to see how Republicans could pick up 1 or 2 seats. Yes, they'll pick up highly handicapped seat. It seems the Democrats were better positioned to hold their most vulnerable seats while the Republicans were struggling. The Tennessee and Texas races even make it to toss-up, say something a tough position. Well, in Texas, it'll be turnouts. Beto O'Rourke in some polling was behind about 5 points. We'll get to that one in a minute. In the state of Indiana, that's Mike, Joe Donnelly, and Mike Braun. Anyway, old Braun is they have a 50-50 like here. Donnelly had been ahead, and Indiana, they call it Bloody Indiana, has historically been a very unpredictable place. It is the home state of Justice Roberts. Florida remains a coin toss, although Democrats see a path to victory for Bill Nelson. Bill Nelson could very well win there. Both sides argue the race is within a point. That's true. You're going to see a lot of 1 and 2 point races, and there actually will be less than 1 point. That's how we see it at the Ouija board, and it all goes down to turnout. The same can be said of Missouri. That is where Claire McCaskill is facing a right-wing named Josh Hockley. There's been plenty of public polling, but both parties say the race is essentially a dead heap. That is it. Claire McCaskill has had quite a few dead heaps in her career. There, she's out of Springfield, Missouri. The contest now in Montana is a little different contest. John Tester and the auditor Matt Rosendale has a tighten, but Tester maintains an advantage there in the state of Montana. And we see Tester as, at this point, squeaking by, as they say. A toss-up now. This is in Jersey. Shouldn't be happening in Jersey. We've had some disappointing races there. We had at one time a moderate Democrat governor. What was her name? Christine, whatever. Anyway, and of course we had Tutan Christie as a governor there in Jersey. Bob Menendez, then his ethic problems. He's taken on by a guy named Bob Huggin. Anyway, has outspent the incumbent by $27.7 million to $11.8 million. Quite a bit. According to reports, most of Huggins' money has funded TV ads. That's one way of knocking down one's favorables and bringing up the unfavorables. The Senate Majority PAC, the Democratic Super PAC, have invested more than $6.5 million in the race, including $3 million in advertising by this week. But Menendez, unfortunately for him, the bad publicity has come, and of course he was indicted, and he was basically ended up being acquitted. And of course the Democratic Party had to make a decision, as in the Attorney General's race in Minnesota, whether to put him back on the ticket or not. Now in Nevada, we go there. That's Jackie Rosen, and that Dean Heller. He was one of the most endangered species there, but cautioned that he needs to stay ahead several points to overcome Harry Reid's get out the vote situation. They don't believe that Heller is quite there yet. The Cook Report, one of the things that they do, they interview people on the ground. Strategists also feel better about the GOP representative. That is Martha McSally in her race against Kristen Sinema. Sinema has had the luxury of defining herself, while McSally was embroiled with people like Joe Arpaio, etc. in the primary. But the last 2 months redefining Sinema with her own words, and again released in the media, used a TV advertised video of her saying disparaging things about Arizona 20 years ago. And once she called the meth lab of democracy, for example, and statements she made, including in 2003. We covered that debate, incidentally, responding to a hypothetical question, saying she had no problem with the Taliban. Well, the problem with the Taliban has been around for a very, very long time. Before the Americans got there, the Americans basically are out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban is still there. So that says a lot about the Taliban, and the Taliban eventually one day will, with other forces, form a government in Afghanistan. Both parties acknowledge these statements have hurt Sinema and allowed McSally to gain some momentum going into the final days. Though the contest remains, it does remain very close. And in Arizona, it turned out to be a turnout model. Now to Tennessee and Texas. Texas, very red state there. Marsha Blackburn has picked up steam, according to them. The race remains competitive, but the trends favor Blackburn today. We'll look at some polling there. There's a difference of opinion amongst Republicans, where the race in Texas, that's between Lion Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, stands today. Cruz allies contend the incumbent is ahead of O'Rourke, well outside of marginal error, while we are aware of other reliable polling that shows a close race. It seems, our sense is that this is a close race, but Cruz has an advantage. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. More of the Cook report here. We have some toss-up states, 11 days to go, including the very red state of Oklahoma. A toss-up, New Hampshire leaning Republican. New Hampshire has been bad. New Hampshire used to be a very reliable state. Not of that so much now. These toss-ups here in the very red states. We have Keith Brown, a little disappointment out in Oregon, being in one of the toss-ups, and also in Connecticut. Connecticut's a referendum on outgoing unpopular Governor Malloy. Dan Malloy, a controversial unpopular President DJ Trump. Connecticut's solid blue state, yeah, it is, and it should be, favors the Democrats. And Neil Lamont, but the voters' dissatisfaction with the direction of the state may help some business person there, Stanford-Koski. Keith Brown, that's an interesting situation out there. It was a 5-point race. Acknowledged that Brown is ahead 2 of 4 points. And in the state of Colorado, it now looks out of reach for the Republicans. That race has Jared Polis is helped by both a favorable political landscape for Democrats and the Republican Walker Stapleton's weak campaign. In Rhode Island, the Republican Government Association has canceled TV ads. Well, that tells you something. Anytime they pull out of a state, the jig is up, so to speak. The race out in Alaska, we covered the debate out there. The independent Walker dropped out. The lieutenant governor dropped out. Mark Bulich. And the former state representative Dunleavy there, but Walker remains on the ballot. They can fix that out there. He still gets 10 to 20% of the votes. Democrats find their hands somewhat tied here. It's not easy to get money in to the state, and they have not laid a foundation to do so, leaving them with only a few options. Dunleavy remains a favorite to win. In Alaska, we'll go to Alaska in a minute here. A lot of business to take care of. Democrats are lined up in Illinois. Bruce Remus has been in trouble for a very long time. Open seats in Michigan and in New Mexico. Michigan's an interesting situation, 5 or 6 point race there. Debbie Stabenow will come up with some polling there. And Kim Reynolds in Iowa, she's in a toss-up. And old Boss Walker in Wisconsin. A lot of the polling there has favored Evans, the superintendent of schools there. Open seats in Florida, very close race down there. Mr. Gillum. In Georgia, Miss Abrams. in Kansas, Maine, Nevada, Ohio, and South Dakota. South Dakota could be, this is on the gubernatorial side. Oklahoma joins the ranks of a toss-up race. Republicans have long argued that the solid red nature of the state would propel their nominee, some mortgage CEO Stiff, into the governor's chair, but some Republican strategists are growing concerned, and no doubt about that. 8 years of Mary Phelan, the late great Jerry Pippin had some comments on her. I forget what they called her, Mattress Mary or something like that. But anyway, Phelan may well be the most unpopular governor in the country today. That's a strange situation because she was a very popular governor, but she did have to raise some taxes. Ian Reynolds in Iowa and Walker are locked in tight races, no doubt about that. The Democrats feel that they're gaining some traction in Florida. That's because of young people in Florida, just as in Georgia, and the followers of O.J. Simpson. There's no doubt about that. And what else do we have? These open seats, we've talked about those. And now the possibility, here's an interesting situation here. In Florida, you could end up with a runoff behind Stacey Abrams and the Secretary of State, Kemp, would go to a December runoff because you have a libertarian there, and he could pull enough votes. Conclusion here is Democrats concerned that some GOP-held toss-up contests may tip towards Republicans simply because some of those states are so red. Well, that can always happen. That's a scenario that happens. I mean, not a lot you can do about that. Part of the problem the Democrats had was being over-advertised. The blue wave, one of the basic tenets of politics is that you never want to peak too far out of the election date. And they had the Democrats in that blue wave peaking back in the spring and early summer. That's not when you want to do it. And also they had the Me Too hearings, I call them the Me Too hearings, with Ford. And our opinion at the Ouija board has always been that Kavanaugh was a waste of time. The Republicans had the votes to confirm him all the time. And one of the problems is, this is back to the old Kenny Rogers song, you have to know when to hold up and when to fold up. They should have basically folded the tent up. Yes, bringing Dr. Ford in was a good idea, but you kind of overstep things. And a lot of that is from inexperience, and basically one element of the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016, they could not close it out. And there were a lot of problems there. Voter suppression was a big problem, and the media would talk about the Russian interference. Russian interference was about third on the list. Voter suppression, and number two was political malpractice on the part of the Clinton team. They didn't know how to run a campaign properly. They let Wisconsin, for one, get away from them. It would not have happened. But, as they say, as things go along, people get to do better. I think we already did. Charlie Cook's got a new one out here. I'm not sure. Knowing the midterm elections and referendums on the incumbent, basically it's what Carl Rove has talked about. Republicans have prayed since the early stage of this election cycle that DJ Trump's job approval ratings would rise, as written. Trump was a millstone around the necks of these candidates. The good news for Republicans, the numbers have definitely been improving since Labor Day. The past week, he's using ABC News Wall Street Journal polls showing Trump's approval rating up to 47, the highest of his presidency, with his disapproval rating down to 49. These confirm some other data. For example, Gallup has improvement at approval rating at 44 for the past 2 weeks, the highest hit of 45. Now, Gallup is one we look at as the Cadillac, I guess, of that. The approval numbers are pretty steady, progression climbing gradually from 38, that was in September, to the current of 44 at Gallup. Now, in some of these states, he's not at 44. He's lower than that. In October 13 through 16, Fox poll showed him at 47 overall, 51% disapproval rating. The ABC Washington Post, that's 8 through 7, slightly wider at 1.6 to 1 approval at 41, disapproval at 54. Now, this is the NBC, and this is one of the things to always look at. Bill and Duffy, McInduffie, I suppose, McInturfie. Anyway, a Republican poster from Public Opinion Strategies and Democratic. Oh, okay, we did one of those. Hart Research, Fred Yang showed Trump at 47%, well, much improved as in late October with Barack Obama. The year that Democrats lost 63 seats in the House. Different situation there. Wouldn't put a lot into that. And they go back to Bill Clinton here. It's 1 point worse than Bill Clinton had in October of 1994, just before his party lost the 54 seats in the House, 8 in the Senate, and controls of both chambers, while Trump getting better. They're still bad. First, there were more Democrats and Republicans. The 6 NBC Wall Street Journal poll since June, 32% of the voters identified as Democrats, 26 as Republicans, a 6-point edge. When those independents who admit to leaning towards one party or the other were factored in, the advantage was 5 points, so 42 to 37. We'd say less than that, but anyway. Then there is a much discuss intensity difference between the 6 polls. This is the NBC Wall Street Journal since January. Asked voters of their interest in the upcoming election. The merged data from from January through September showed 63% of Democrats call their interest level either 9s or 10s on a scale of 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, while 53% of Republicans, 9s or 10s there. That 10% intensity advantage for Democrats through September poll showed a pickup amongst Republicans. In October's survey, Democrats had increased 9 points to 72%, and Republicans at 68% in that poll. Overall, 48% of of voters nationally preferred a Democratic-controlled Congress to 41%. But this is nationally, and being very, very skeptical of national polling when, in fact, you got to look at state polling. 2 sets of numbers jumped out in the Republicans' midterm election of 210, 214. Republicans led by 13 and 12% points in the suburbs, where Democrats now lead by 1 point in 210, 214. European women, Republicans had a lead of 19 and 14 points respectively. Democrats now lead by 8 points. That's pretty much conceded. In competitive House districts and to a certain extent in many gubernatorial and state legislative contests, these are numbers that are driving the so-called blue wave. But in Senate contests where 9 of the 13 competitive seats are in states DJ Trump carried, with disproportionate numbers of rural and small-town voters, the blue wave just doesn't get that far. Well, yeah, the rural vote, that's been a historic thing for the Republicans. One factor watching is whether the Latino vote and voters age 18 to 34 actually show up. We'll see the 18 to 34 showing up, historically both low. The early voting in Florida has shown that this group of younger people are showing up. Latinos, that's another question. While both groups may vote in higher percentages than normal for midterms, each is unlikely to reach the potential of their relative share of the electorate should be. In the midterm in 2006 survey is a good year for Democrats. 38% of the 18 to 34. Again, that's over 10 years ago. 9 or 10, the merged data for younger people from all NBC, Wall Street Journal polls, 210 and 214 was 34 and 28%, respectively. Surveys conducted January through September this year is just 35%. But in a mid-October poll, it was up to 51%. For Latinos, mid-October 2006, a totally different thing. I would not use that number. Was 61%, actually 2% higher than among Europeans for 210 and 214. It was 48 and 41 respectively. This month it was 71% higher than the 64 and 68% respectively among Europeans and African Americans, given the voters 18 to 24 and Latinos favor Democratic control by the House, 26 to 40 point margin respectively. There's these are intriguing numbers if they pan out. Well, that's a big point if they pan out. In Texas, Beto O'Rourke is hoping they pan out. Going through the questionnaires and analyses of major network polls, there are far more sophisticated than virtually the state-level polls in the public domain. It is like trying to drink water from a fire hydrant of data, but one interesting finding is that NBC Wall Street Journal involves people who have a negative opinion of both parties, recalling that in 2016 the voters who disliked both Hillary Clinton and Trump broke at the end heavily towards Trump, arguably making the difference in the elections. This poll amongst those who have negative opinions of both parties. In the August survey, they favored Democrats by 3 points, 42 to 39. In September, those with negative views of both parties favored Democrats by 5 points. But in the latest survey, the Democratic margin soared to 42. Now, that's something to look at there, and we will be watching this as we move along. Let's go to the current polling. Looking at our time here, we're doing okay. This is on today's polling from Real Clear. Several polls here. Debbie Stabenow, we talked about this. She's up by 6 points. This is a Mitchell Research poll out of Michigan, one of the more reliable polls. Whitmire is up by 5 points. She's running for governor in the state of Michigan. In Illinois, District 6, Caston's up by 2 points. I assume that's a margin of error there. And Utah, this has been one very surprising situation. Miss Love out there and McAdams are tied up. Norman Republicans are ahead there. This is a Texas Tribune poll. It was out on Friday. We looked at it. It has Ted Line Cruz up by 6 points. Wheelchair Abbott by 19 points. In California, District 10, Harder up by 2 points. Levin up by 14. That's in California, 49. These are New York Times polls, incidentally. And Davis up by 5. That is Illinois, 13. Jersey 3. McCarthy up by 1. McCarthy is a Republican. Ohio, 1st District there. Shabbat is up. Shabbat is up by 9 in that district. Texas, Culberson is up by 1. That's Texas 7. The approval ratings, depending on who you talk to here, is NPR has DJ Trump at 41. The outliner poll, Rasmussen at 48. They've kept him in the game. And we won't even get into the congressional. We'll go to Thursday. We have polling out of Florida. Nelson up by 1. That is a WCTV poll. An epic poll. This is in Michigan. Had Debbie Stabenow up by 7. She was at double digits. Out of California, Dianne Feinstein glides on in double digits, 16. And the WCTV poll has DeSantis up by 3 points over Andrew Gillum. And NBC Marxist poll has Kemp up by 2. That's in Georgia. Another Epic poll has Whitmire up by 5. That's in Michigan. Newsom up by 11. That's a PRIC poll out of California. And then in Florida, we have Powell up by 1 over Cumberson, I believe is who that is. Waxler, that is in a Virginia Washington Post poll there, up by 13 over Comstock. She has been ahead, Waxter, all along there. Cisneros by 1, I believe that's California 39. Florida 26. Powell there up by 1. You have a lot of 1 point races here. Kim is up by 2. That is in Jersey 3 over MacArthur. That's been going back and forth. Some of these approval ratings, this is on Thursday. USA Today, DJ Trump at 42. Reuters at 46. These generic ballots, USA Today, Democrats at 8. And Reuters, Democrats at 7. So you're going kind of backs and forth here. We have a Gravis poll here, that's a Republican House. Actually had, this was on Wednesday, had Nelson up by 4, Debbie Stabenow by 16. That's an MRG poll out of Michigan. Menendez up by 5. That is a Rutgers Eagleton poll. Another Gravis poll out of Florida had Gillum up by 5. Gravis goes backs and forth. Some of their polls are better than other polls, and so we'll see where that falls. It doesn't fall. At 45, that's The Economist. YouGov poll, online poll there. And Rasmussen, this was on Wednesday, had Democrats up by 3. YouGov had Democrats up by 6. And that was so forth. That we usually go back over. On Tuesday, another slew of polls out here. Florida Atlantic had Scott up by 1. Braun up by 4. This is Indianapolis Politics. This is Mason Strategies. Braun up by 4 over Donnelly. MTN poll out of Montana had Tester up by 3. Another poll out of Montana against Rosendale. Tesla up by 9. So you got different things here. Wacker, that's in Mississippi. Forget about that. Well, yeah, he's way up there. Gillum, this is Florida Atlantic University, was up by 4. Quantipac had Gillum up by 6. Yeah. And Opinion is Savvy had it tied between Abrams and Company. And let's see who else. Alaska, this is one of the few polls out there. Has Dunleavy up by 4 over Borkich. He's 44, he's 48. Yeah, that's closing in there. We'll check back with that poll and see where we are. In Montana, Guilford over Williams, up by 8. That is unfortunate. Another Montana poll here. That's MSU poll. I guess it's University of Montana State University. Guilford up by 3. Very close race there. And Booth up by 9, etc. And we have a Survey USA that was back on Monday. Donnelly up by 1. And Quantipac had Nelson up by 6. All over the place here. A Bay News poll, Survey USA, again, Nelson up by 8. That's kind of an interesting situation going with that. And let's do some more running around here. We've already done that. We've done that. Okay. Max Muncy, 18 endings, a World Series victory here. This is from the LA Times. After more than 7 hours on Friday night, it became Sunday morning. Desperation, fighting, exhaustion. The LA Dodgers, Max Muncy, drove a pitch over the left field fence at Dodger Stadium. As Muncy rounded the bases and reached home plate, his teammates ran out. They would have expected to do that. This is the longest World Series game ever. The Dodgers return home to their history, their hysteria, and a 3-2 18-inning victory in Game 3 over the Red Sox of Boston. So that was Friday night. It was do or die for the Dodgers, no doubt about that, but it's a hell of a thing. Kenley Jansen gave up a home run. First, they survived a runner at the corner in the 10th with one of the greatest throws in Dodger history. That was Cody Bellinger there. And let's see what else we have going on here. Eduardo Munoz then hit a fly to medium center. It was caught by Bellinger here. A little bit of the play-by-play going on here. Nathan Eovaldi from Boston, he pitched a 6-inning 3-hit ball in relief. I thought he went 7. The game was so long the Red Sox of Mookie Betts went hitless in 7 at-bats while making 7 outfield position changes. It was a very, very long game. The game was so long, Brian Dozier, desperate to add a little bit of spark. Oh, yeah, well, in the dugout with his bananas. I think he didn't even go in and do bananas. The game was so long, the Times, a sports writer, Marta Torres, literally aged a year. Her birthday occurred in the 17th inning. Kind of a little story going on here. But that was that, and let's do the scores from last night. Ran a little bit over here, but not too bad. The basketball scores, and we'll end the broadcast here. The Bulls were at the Hornets. The Hornets 135-108 to the Bulls. The Warriors were at the Knickerbockers in New York. Warriors 128-100. The Mavericks were at the Raptors in Toronto. Raptors 116-107. The Clippers were at the Rockets in Houston, and the Rockets didn't take off. A blast off, 133 for the Clippers, 113 for the Rockets. The Bucks were at the T-Wolves. It was Bucks 125-95. The Nets at the Pelicans in the Big Easy 2-point game, 117-115 for the Nets of Jersey. The Warriors and Kings. The Kings 116-112 for the Warriors, and that does it for sports. And that'll do it for us from the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. We go merrily off. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll be back on many of these channels, whether it be on YouTube, iHeart, Stitcher, and whatever else you can throw in there. Between the Blog Talk, you name it, we'll return. And what else is going on here? Well, in Numbers Man will appear on many of these channels also. I think we said that before. And we're appreciative of the people on iHeart, the people on Stitcher, listeners, I should say there. Spotify has been picking up also. YouTube is picking up. We'll get some video on YouTube. We promise that we will. And you can go now to bostonred.org, and you can find many of the programs the iHeart viewers are there, and you'll find all of our episodes there across the realm. Boston Red is there, and the Numbers Man, that's our macroeconomic program. You can find that there. And I believe you can also find the open source report there, and we'll continue to work on this. Good day.